Hey there, Professor Snart checking in. It is Wednesday morning as I'm looking at our course here. I'm just going to click myself into the due dates and see where we're at. So we've just finished up our unit of ethics and looking at some of the earliest literary heroes, quote unquote, that we've got, which was due Tuesday, June 5th. Once again, the quality of the work that's being done is really great. So if you're not reading through a number of these essays, I really encourage you to do so. They're really good. And of course, we're working in a very compressed time period with a lot of text that you're dealing with, so people are, I think, doing a really good job of kind of distilling a lot of that text, all of those pages that we're working through, into some meaningful kinds of interpretations or analyses. And one of the interesting things that emerges then, especially from a unit like this, where we're thinking about a character type like the hero, and is somebody heroic, are they not heroic? You can see in the collection of essays we have here on the discussion board really the variety of interpretations that can be developed and supported. So sort of like multiple right answers, which is great. It's one of the things that I really love about kind of English as a discipline, that it allows for multiple correct possibilities. I think that's also something that some people find discouraging or frustrating about the discipline, is that there's no correct one that they can depend on. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, I guess. But anyway, this is a really great unit where you can see lots of ideas being developed about who is heroic and what that term even means and how it can be variously applied. And one of the things that I'm glad people picked up on is the way in which some of our early heroes were quite literally within their narrative contexts, both a combination of the human or the mortal and the divine, and how that interplay really does stay with us as part of our modern, more well, I guess just modern hero, no matter what form they take. Although it's rarely a case of a direct sort of divinity or God stature, but it certainly is that very problem of our heroes, is that we would like them to embody the best of our values and of our intentions and our kind of cultural morals, but they don't all the time. So we still have heroes that are semi-divine, at least in terms of what we expect from them. And that goes for fictional heroes, like all the superheroes that we run into, but I think our real everyday heroes as well. We really need people to be heroic in that sense, so that they can show forth the best possibilities for humankind. We really need that as a culture. And so we often will create heroes or celebrate heroes, I think in many cases rightly, for heroic deeds, but also kind of for the wrong reasons or at the wrong times, or we choose a very narrow part of a person's life story. This happens with sports figures all the time, or film stars or whatever. We celebrate this one very narrow aspect of them as heroic, as kind of the having fulfilled the epitome of something within their field, and then we do our best to ignore the rest of it. Although we're equally interested when the hero crashes and burns, and I think the most recent one that I'm most aware of is like the Tiger Woods situation. So even if you're not a golfer or interested in that, you probably know who Tiger Woods is and know of the story. He's this groundbreaking athlete, looking to be one of the best who had ever played the game, and so is raised at this sort of heroic stature. But it turns out that his personal life had all of these crazy things going on. So we have this interesting relationship to our heroes, right? We love them, and we love to create them as heroes. We love to celebrate them as heroes, but then when they're not 100% divine, when they're human, that really complicates things. And often we then focus on how they betrayed us and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to forgive Tiger Woods or condone what he did or anything like that. But it does point to how complex our relationship is to heroes, and so much of that came out of the discussion board essays. It's really great to see. So now we move into an interesting unit that's due Thursday, June 7th, right around the corner again, on the roots of spirituality. And We return then, like we had done with the creation myths a little bit, to spiritual or religious writing. And this again is one of those units that you really have to put your own personal belief systems aside and read or encounter the ideas that we have here as ideas, as texts that existed in a particular culture and time period and arose out of a certain, cultural circumstance. So it's not about believing that this one is right and this one is wrong, this one's better, this one's worse, anything like that. You just don't have to make those value judgments. In your personal life, of course, you can. Like, that's what we do, many people. But that's not what we're doing here. So there's absolutely no way that we wouldn't cover this material in a Masterpieces of World Lit kind of class, but it is one of those potential kind of tricky areas for people in terms of choosing what to write about, and you just have to be very conscious, because even if you're like, oh, I'm not the kind of guy who would, I'm not going to badmouth the Egyptian ways of thinking or whatever, there's a funny way in which that prejudice sort of creeps into our writing, and we end up privileging one worldview over another, almost unconsciously, because it's become a way a way that we just perceive the world, and so it gets expressed in these unintentional ways. So do your best to avoid that kind of privileging of one tradition over another, and treat these as a textual tradition or a literary tradition rather than a spiritual or religious one, even though that's what they are, really. Okay, so another little note on the reading options here, because we have a lot of different kind of possibilities or configurations. So the readings are broken up into 3 different sets. And the sets are just sort of like thematic categories, if you want to think of it that way. There's great religious figures, focusing sort of on individuals who are depicted in these works. Great teachings, kind of the history of ideas. And then the religion and great ideas, which is a sort of a reconfiguration of that history of ideas kind of approach. So we have these 3 different sets. And then we also have a few different traditions that we're looking at, and they group differently into these sets. And it's easier to see this in the unit, when you're actually looking at it. So within, for example, set 1, we have readings from Exodus, from the Indian tradition, the Ramayana, and then from the Islamic tradition, from the Quran. So you have these various traditions represented within this thematic set. So as far as your choices for readings here, you're selecting readings from at least 2 of the 3 thematic sets. Okay, so you've covered maybe set 1 and set 2 in your choices. Not everything in those sets, but you're choosing from at least 2 of the 3. And you could easily choose from all 3, right? The total pages that you read should be about 45. So again, you can look at the page count and make sure that the total of everything that you read is about 45, give or take. And then in terms of what you choose, the readings must represent at least 3 of the traditions. So don't get the sets and the traditions confused. Again, it's easier to see probably. I don't know if I'm helping or hurting at this point. So the traditions include the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, I think we have represented here. I'm not sure. Maybe it's, oh yeah, we do. The Chinese, Indian, and then the Islamic. So the 4 traditions, and they break into these 3 thematic sets. Again, read for content, not necessarily for ideas that you think are right or wrong. And then, as with the creation myths unit, part of what we're looking to see here is not so much the differences between religious traditions, which is really what people tend to focus on, like ours is the right one and yours is the wrong one, but really, again, sort of similarities, whether it's similarities in terms of great religious figures who show up in these traditions, similarities maybe in terms of ideas, so kind of like fundamental connections between these texts as expressions of cultural ideas or situations at a particular time period. So in a lot of cases, it surprises people that there are so many connections and fundamental similarities between what is often presented to us as these dichotomous sort of polar opposite traditions, whether it's East versus West, or obviously the sort of Islamic demonization that happens so often in the West, like they're the bad guys and all that kind of stuff. Try to set that aside and look for those really fundamental and hopefully surprising connections. Don't forget the reply aspect here. And again, I'm really struck by the quality of the essays that people are doing, but also the quality of the replies. They're really looking at the ideas and the responses and developing sort of like ideas based on those ideas. So it really is the closest we can come to a kind of dialogue in this medium without having, you know, face-to-face components or you know, real-time components built into the class, which is actually kind of cool, but for many people defeats the purpose of the flexibility of the online environment. One note about the replies that you're doing: try as much as you can to focus on the ideas that people are expressing rather than the quality of the writing necessarily. And that's not to say that if an essay is, Skype message, if an essay is like well organized or well written, or there's lots of good quotations used, by all means mention that, because it feels good as the writer to know that you're doing strong work like that and it's affecting people, or people are noticing it. But really what we're interested in addition to that, as the focus, is really a response to the ideas that people are expressing, whether they're different from the ones that you had developed or similar but you hadn't thought of things in a certain way. So try to focus more on ideas than the writing part. But don't eliminate the writing part, because like I said, that is nice to hear as a writer, that your good work is being noticed. Okay, so once again, we just keep on tearing through here. If you have any questions, be in touch with me, and I will be back in touch with you as soon as I can.